Hi everyone, I'm Madison.
And I'm Vanessa.
And we make maps at Mapbox. Cool. Slide.
Oh God,
In this presentation, we'll be discussing the importance of design feedback and strategies for it. For those in managerial roles, I'll be talking about strategies for facilitating feedback. And for freelancers and ICs, I'll be focusing on client conversations. And then Vanessa will deep dive and talk about personal engagements, public feedback, and the very critical difference of criticism and critique. So next slide, please. For those of you wondering why we should have design reviews for maps, this tweet is my only response. Next slide, please. So the main differentiator between professional work and personal work is that this work is for someone else. And I'll get into that a little bit in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Yes. For those who lead teams in some capacity, being able to structure and guide a cartographic design session is crucial to increasing the quality of output and enriching one of the most important skills for your team. In contextualizing a session, be really clear about these three things. First, the goal. What do you want the maps and the mappers to get out of the design? Next is the audience. Who is going to view this map, the general public or other mappers? And thirdly, the metrics for success. Given the goal and audience, what are the specific and often numeric achievements that you're aiming for? Currently, I'm in admin for the Spatial Community Slack channel, and we wanted to elevate the discussions in a channel called Bad Maps. We drafted a note to members about changing the name and, more importantly, the purpose behind it, which, fitting for this, was about wanting to facilitate a more positive and inclusive space for talking about maps. Once the framing has been established, you now have to consider the structure. Of course, it will change based on your team size, deadline, etc. But from our design team at Mapbox, we focus on one project at a time to give each map and mapper respect. In design reviews, it's critical to establish trust, and that can only begin to happen if the right environment is set. So if you're a manager, it's not up to you to give feedback on every design, but it is up to you to ensure that the team has a way to communicate their design and feedback with each other. A system is also much more scalable, and it allows the team to operate in the out of office. If you're not sure where to start, I definitely recommend looking at collaborative design tools or Kanbans, really whatever kind of works for your team. And Mapbox, we use emojis, and that's all I'm really going to say. So if you're a facilitator, you want to be timely on these things too, ensuring that it's in cadence with the timeline of your project, not just kind of arbitrarily set dates. And finally, you want to ensure that it's a design review, not an ideation session. By exposing deeper layers of the problem, you're letting everyone on the team think about different solutions rather than just championing one or two. Next slide, please. So the first two primary bullets are very similar to the previous slide, but the angle is a bit different because you're the expert in this case. So when you're either kind of the IC or the freelancer, being extremely clear about the goal and why behind the project is critical to ensure you both have the same thing in mind. For a bit of an offhand example, when I say, let's go get ice cream, we all have a vague picture in mind of kind of eating some ice cream. But some might be thinking in a cone, others in a cup, some chocolate, others vanilla, and so on. We all have the same idea, but a very different reaction and path to it. So how can you make it so you and your client have the same idea and the same path? As mentioned, have multiple small scope metrics for success that you can tangibly achieve to prove an ultimate success and instantiate a design feedback collection system. If there's any questions you have while working, be sure to get that into your report and next meeting with your client. And finally, because you're the expert, it's almost inevitable that the client will want something that isn't totally possible or disagrees with you on something. Reiterate the points that you laid out about success, but also be empathetic and truly value the perspective of a non-cartographer looking critically at your map. Ask the customer what you're looking for, or what they're looking for, and then ask yourself how you can adjust. When responding to customers about map feedback, it can be very frustrating if they're not knowledgeable about maps or design. But remember that you are working towards their goal, and and be sure to never overpromise. Cool. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to say that with that slide. And with virtual feedback, particularly with written, be cautious about your word choice, since body language and tone don't convey very well through text, which is a great point for me to pass over to Vanessa about virtual feedback.
Thanks for that handoff, Madison. I guess you already saw the next slide. So I will be talking about virtual public feedback, and in particular, I'm going to be addressing a lot of the negative stuff that happens in virtual and public feedback, which Daniel did a great job touching on as well. And I do want to remind everyone at this point that I'm only focusing on that. And there is a lot of great public and virtual feedback that is really well done, but I really just want to address the negative side to make sure that there's a space where we're really talking about it so that we as a community can address it both internally and see it if it's happening in the way that we critique things, but also so that we feel comfortable showing other people something that they can possibly learn and grow from if you see that there's some negative criticisms occurring, and also so that you might feel more comfortable speaking out against that as well. So critiques behind screens or public critiques, but especially on the internet, can often lead to feedback that is nothing like Madison just described. Often there's no trust established or even connection in the critique that's happening, and it's very sort of removed from the creator and the critiquer. Appropriate feedback sometimes is mixed in with rude, mean, or snarky comments, which are all the more sort of easy to make when you're on, like, kind of have the mask of the internet distance. Distance of the internet provides a sense of anonymity, even if you're not anonymous. And of course, on the internet, there is a lot of spaces where you can be anonymous, where you're using a username instead, which also just makes it a lot easier as well to not like be always nice in your feedback or neutral in your feedback. And perhaps people are wondering why we're still talking about criticism and critiquing in the world of cartography and in design and spatial. The fact is, within the spatial community, there has been a lot of quote unquote drama the past few years behind public critiquing, and it's something that needs to be addressed not only in our community, but as a whole across very many different design spaces and other spaces as well. But I think if we really care about our community and want to build a better place and also encourage people to share their opinions and share their work and to encourage growth, we need to continue talking about this. And that's really why we're still talking about it. And the fact is that this year in June, there was a talk that Daniel tweeted out about, and also I imagine one of the many reasons he was inspired to do his talk as well, where people watched a speaker actively making fun of and laughing about some maps, and there was no real takeaway message besides that critique. And then some people responded to Daniel's tweet saying that it was something that made them feel deterred from sharing their own work and also possibly making maps in the first place. And this is really down to the why of why we need to talk about this. So critique sounds funny, but it really is something that needs to be discussed and worked on, and just we can all grow from it. And it's important to remember that critique and criticism are not the same thing. Criticism is more personal. It often can be vague. It can be kind of selfish, which is a little of what Daniel described as well. It can be destructive, and often you don't feel like there's a way to move forward, and you might walk away even feeling a little ashamed or like you got nothing out of it and kind of feel like you don't want to, bring it up again and ask for help. Whereas critique generally is impersonal. It's definitely very constructive. It's very specific to what needs to be changed or fixed. It's more informed and kind of more neutral. So those were more general examples. So as mappy examples, which I think Daniel gave some similar examples, criticism would be, these colors are absolutely terrible. I would have never used this. What an absolutely horrendous projection choice. And critique would be something like, in my opinion, these colors would be more legible, and this is why. Have you considered doing this instead? This projection might be better for this use case, and here's why. So that's a much more neutral toned discussion, as well as kind of removing your emotional connection. Like, we all have enormous design opinions, and of course we know some things that might be better. But if we're really talking to someone who reached out for critique, and especially if it's someone who did not ask for critique, we need to be considering the difference between these two when we're giving this feedback publicly and privately. Critique also can come in the form of grandstanding and bragging, which Daniel also mentioned. And this is a sort of holier than thou critique, where you're saying you always know better always. And this is not good critique, because you're not really caring about the aspect of critiquing and helping something be better. You're caring more about yourself and looking a certain way. And internet critiquing especially ends up being this way in many cases, because it's a place that we can all build our sort of network experience. It's a place where we can show off our expertise and try to get more jobs and more clients. And so some internet critiquing is less about helping to inform, teach, and learn, but rather more about trying to prove oneself and one's knowledge, more about grandstanding and centering oneself in the combo rather than helping someone else get better at X thing. So that's very performative. And Daniel has talked about this as well. And performative critiquing is really where the person cares more about themselves and it's benefiting themselves, as well as not benefiting the person that is critiqued. And I think it's really important to talk about why it's harmful, because I've seen people ask continuously why this is still something that is getting discussed and seeming to not understand why it's happening. And so I think it's really important to discuss why it is harmful. And one of the reasons grandstanding critique is harmful, because that often goes hand in hand with sexism, racism, and other bigoted comments, and perhaps subconscious, but especially conscious moments that will also cause people to feel like they can't share because of the other parts of the critique that went in to the critique. And then grandstanding and criticism also easily will come from people in positions of power within their field. And because those people are in positions of power, their comments go unfettered. People don't feel comfortable calling them out when they're saying something rude, mean, or harmful, because they're in a position of power. So those comments just slide. People say that's just the way they are. And that is something that happens, unfortunately, within our field and has happened many times on the internet. And it's something that needs to be addressed. And if you've never heard the term position of power or authority, in a sort of career-oriented definition, it's like a CEO, a boss, your managers, but it also is people who are really well known in the industry. It's people with money, but these are just a few examples of position of power. There are many instances where this could be happening. And it's just really important to remember that grandstanding and criticism, just like in daily life, if you're critiquing in a rude, mean, satirical, or grandstanding manner, rather than thoughtful, intentional, and a kind manner, you are not critiquing, you are sharing criticisms. And I think we need to really see this difference in order to give better map critiques and general critiques. And so, as noted before, people who are in similar positions of power are therefore scared to share their opinion, share their work, speak up, defend themselves. And that means that we have a lot of people that can't grow in the way they want to grow. And this also will affect in terms of sharing their opinions, like sharing opinions at conferences, raising your hand to ask questions, giving talks themselves, like the kind of criticism that people receive means that they won't really be sharing stuff that they could be sharing that would be helpful, and we're also not helping growth. And also important to note that this is all stuff that people also often have to navigate in their personal life and in their daily life. So it's all exacerbated for many people when it continues in their career space. And I think it's really important to say that I cannot claim to be a perfect person. Just like Daniel said, after graduating, I thought it was really critical for me to have to prove my expertise at the time. And I think sometimes I did definitely choose to do criticisms rather than critiques. But it's so important to show that that's not necessary, and it doesn't help anyone learn and grow, and it doesn't help us become better educators or people who help each other. And today, tomorrow, and years from now, I will always have space to grow. And I think it's important socially or within the cartographic community, all of us have space to grow, because we're still talking about this until we really see the difference between what criticism and critique are, and until we can all help each other see the difference. So we just have to keep talking about this until we can continue to cultivate a welcoming and helpful and inspiring community, which I know we all know and love. And I'm probably out of time. But that's it. So
thank you both so much. What an excellent follow-up to Daniel's talk. I really appreciate what you have had to say about critique and criticism.